Okay, so good night, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the second webinar in the Real World Engineering series. Tonight, as you see, we're going to be taking a look at the first few years in engineering. And tonight we have about 6 guests on the call who are going to be doing a great job at giving us their experience. They're from many different fields, and I'm really hoping that as we go through the session tonight, everyone is going to get a chance to really see what engineering truly can offer, as well as to see you don't have to have it all figured out. Studying is going to give you the basic knowledge, but by the time you actually arrive into the field, you now have so much more to learn. And the thing about it is, why would I wait to learn when I get there, when I can hear from others now and learn from not only their mistakes, but how they've actually mastered surviving in the field? There's going to be so much knowledge that we're going to gain tonight. And what I want to do is I'm going to start soon. I'm just going to give others about 3 more minutes to jump onto the call. And what I'll do in the meantime, I am going to send out a poll. So in this poll, you should be seeing it on the screen right now. We're going to be asking you to just give us an idea of what stage you're currently at. So if you can go ahead and just give us some feedback, that would be great. So we can have an idea of our audience tonight. And just so you know, this whole idea actually came from the feedback from our very first webinar that we hosted last month. So at the end of this webinar, what we're going to do is we're also going to send another link to get some more feedback, because I really think that feedback is a very important part of learning and growing. And the only way you're going to get that is if people provide it for you. So some of the persons who would have attended our last seminar in terms of working with site teams, they gave us some feedback and they told us polls would be really beneficial throughout the chat. I guess instead of just typing out the answers, the poll will be a lot easier to select. You can get as many answers as quickly as possible, and really facilitates an easier response. So you can go ahead and put that in. We have about a few more people to enter, and then we're going to move on to our next question. So far, we actually have quite a lot of experienced engineers on the call. I'm so happy for that. Of course, even though you may not be on the panel, if you have any answer that you want to share, you can always share that in the chat. All information, I believe, is relevant. So anything that you want to share would be truly appreciated. We also do have some early career engineers as well, recent graduates, and at this stage, a university student. Glad we can have you here. And I'm really hoping that this particular webinar is going to give you some key insights, especially even for the recent graduates, because this series is going from sixth form all the way up to recent graduates. There's never going to be a case where you know everything. And there's always going to be something that you can learn as you go along your journey, whether you've been in it for 1 year, 2 years, or even 15 years. Every day, there is something that you can learn. So I'm going to end this poll now, and I'm just going to send out another poll, because now I want to get an idea of what disciplines are actually on this call as well. So tonight, we have some persons who are in civil, electrical thus far. And that's great because we have various different types of engineers on this call. We have someone who is going to speak about their civil experience, someone who's going to speak about their mechanical. We have electrical, power, software, and the software is going to be a little bit of a hint. That person's going to have a dual discipline. And we also have someone for chemical. Even if it's clear that we have this panel discussion tonight and someone missed it, but they really wanted to be in attendance, it's also going to be available on the YouTube channel. So that's definitely something to look out for as well. So as we're getting those answers in for the various disciplines, what I also want to highlight is that as we're going through this panel discussion, the main format is that we're going to be having it as conversational as possible. So we have 6 panelists here with us tonight. And what they're going to do is that they're going to give their real life experience based off some of the questions that I'm going to ask. Of course, if you have any questions, I encourage you to ask them because at the end of the day, this session is for you. And what you can learn, you're only going to get that information when you ask questions. Don't think that any question is too simple. Ask what you know you want to know, all right? So right now we have civil, mechanical, electrical or power, and software. So we're just going to dive straight in because we've reached our time limit now of giving person some time to sign in. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to hand the floor now over to the presenters. So with our panelists tonight, just giving you an idea, we have Zaria Lane. Her discipline is chemical engineering. Tajiri Griffith, his discipline is power engineering. Shannon Clark, he has technically 2 disciplines. If he wants to share about it, he can definitely go ahead and do that. But I invited him tonight for his software engineering discipline. We have Rashid Thompson for mechanical engineering, Kenton Gamble for civil engineering, as well as Jonathan Brathwaite for electrical engineering. So, Zaria, please open the floor. Tell us about yourself so that way we can have an idea of what does chemical engineering involve?
Hey, hi, good night, everybody. My name is Zaria Lane. So, just a little bit about myself. I currently work at Barbados National Energy Company Limited. My title is Petroleum Engineer. I've been there for 2 years now. I would have studied chemical engineering, as we would have said. A little bit about myself. I would have studied in Canada. I went to Western University in London, Ontario. Um, why did I choose that specific university? I thought it would be a good experience. To be honest, I always wanted to study in Canada. Then also a benefit for that specific university is that they give a common first year. So I got to study multiple disciplines in my first year. And then in my second year, I went into the stream of chemical engineering. Um, some more about me outside of all the work stuff. I like to bake and I like to dance as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. If you don't mind me asking, what kind of dance is it?
Well, I grew up doing ballet, so from the time I was around 3, I did ballet.
Oh, that means that you're on your toes. How do does it hurt anymore, or have you mastered it completely by now? No, absolutely no pain.
I'm pretty, I'm accustomed to the pain, yeah. So it's good now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Saria. So you can see here that so far we have chemical engineering discipline who would have studied overseas in Canada. So we're going to get so much information tonight. And the next person that we're going to move on to now is Tajiri Griffith. His engineering discipline is power. Tajiri, whenever you're ready.
Hi, good night, everyone. You hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you
All
well.
right. Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Tajiri Griffith. Yes, no, I've heard that name before, but it's technically new, unique. Like the person I am. I'm currently 25 years old, kind of young engineer, and I currently work at TMR Sales and Service. For those who don't know what TMR is, we specialize in HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, air condition, electrical equipment such as UPS, generators, motors, and so on. So that is where I currently work at. I'm a service engineer there. And I studied electrical and power engineering. The reason why I emphasize on power is because we are slightly different from other electrical degrees. So I studied in Mona in Jamaica. And the reason I say it's different from other electrical degrees because in Trinidad, they specialize in computer engineering and power. We looked at wide range, as in wide range in generation, like nuclear power, um, renewable power, anything related to power generation, we specialize at. And one fun fact about me, I kind of a boring guy, some might say. I like to watch sports, and I guess I'm a quite curious guy. Some might say it's maliciousness. I don't think it's maliciousness. I try hard not to say that word, but I'm a quite a curious guy.
So I'm actually curious because this is actually my first time hearing about that electrical and power engineering degree in Mona. How was that experience for you?
Um, Honestly, because the I would say the degree was quite new. Um, it
Mm.
now had to develop, especially at Mona. The more useful degrees would be like civil and biomedical that's being used in Mona. So it was kind of we are helping them develop the degree. So it was challenging, yes. But as you can see, I made it eventually. So yeah, that's how my experience was.
And the final question I have for you, what sports is it that you're watching?
Boy, from when I was very young, well, from like primary school all the way, I was always an active child. So you can name it from basketball to cricket, football, track and field mainly. All those sports I tend to love. I just like the competitiveness. Guess that's where it came from.
It's good to know because I know oftentimes, we watch sports and we scream and we shout at what they're playing, but
I
most people can't do
understand
the
it.
same thing.
It's true. It's true. It can't happen for real.
It can happen. Thank you so much, Tajiri. Great introduction. So the next person that we're going to be moving on to now is Shannon Clark. Shannon, whenever you are ready.
Hey, okay. You want me to start with my introduction?
Yes, please.
All right, thanks. And welcome to everyone here who's listening. My name is Shannon Clark. As Ria mentioned already, I am electrical and computer engineer, currently working as a full stack developer at GovTech Barbados, as well as my own businesses. Um, you may ask how they got there. So I actually studied electrical and computer engineering at St. Augustine UWI campus. Um, and for 10 years, I actually would have been in construction, design engineering, and then working at Barbados Light and Power until I got bored and I decided that I wanted new challenges. So I really enjoyed fields such as being a utility, especially construction, but software engineering offers what someone like me who often gets bored very easily really, really seeks. Always a new thrill, always a changing industry. Um, Perhaps something that I could say is that one experience that really shaped my early career is when I was still studying, and I spoke to some graduates who had started working, and they said that you only really start to learn engineering when you're working, when you're actually working on real life projects.
So that's very interesting. So we got 2 points that I definitely want to just, get some more information on. You got
Mhm.
bored. Let's expand on that a bit. How did you get bored actually doing electrical engineering?
Um, I always love a new challenge. And I had the fortune of working with some really, really great people and very intelligent people. And to be honest, sometimes I that's always the thing that's brought me back to engineering. But what I noticed, especially when I was working at Barbados Light and Power, I noticed where the industry was going. And it wasn't a field where I could explore as freely as I wanted to, um, without getting someone else's permission. This is always a thing for me. Probably an interesting fact for me is that I am an artist at heart. I've played music. I've won awards for both art and music. So the opportunity to create, which I really think is what we're doing as engineers, is always enthralling to me. I always want freedom when I'm doing that.
That's very interesting. So when you say art, do you mean like sculptures? Are we using paint? Are we drawing by hand?
Visual art, um, but building things for people to use. When we're engineers, we are solving problems for sure, but we're also solving problems to improve people's lives. And the opportunity to impact many persons' lives at the same time, that always excites me. In construction, for instance, you're building a building. I would have worked as a MEP design engineer. That was my second job. First, construction was working as essentially electrician at what is now Kensington Oval. Um, and being able to look back on those things and see, hey, people are enjoying this every day. My work has meaning. That ultimately is what it is, and I think that's what artist does as well. I said that artist also sends a message.
Thank you so much for that, Shannon. I really appreciate it. So far, for those persons that may have just joined, we've heard from Zaria Lane in the discipline of chemical engineering. My sticking point right now is everything that is different. Zaria does ballet. That must means that she's extremely graceful and her feet no longer feel pain. Okay. We also have Tadiri. He's a very active person. He is not malicious, just making sure I'm clear about that. But he's a very active person. And even though he said he's boring, that's all right. Everything can be exciting in life. And of course, we have Shannon, who would have moved from electrical engineering, who ultimately he found it just a little bit boring, not enough space for creativity. And now he's in software engineering, definitely making his mark and being very creative at that. So the next person that we're going to move on to is Rashid Thompson in the discipline of mechanical. Whenever you're ready, Rashid.
Hi, good night, everybody.
Good
As Ray
night.
just said, my name is Rashid Thompson. I studied at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. My job, or my degree is in mechanical engineering. My job is primarily in MEP design. I work for a company called ADEB Consultants. My specialty here is HVAC design and plumbing design. Just like TGRE, I'm a bit boring, well, very boring. I'm a chronic movie watcher and I enjoy fishing.
So just before you move on, in case you have some more to share, I'm curious. Fishing.
Mhm.
What is that like in Barbados? Because I know when I watch movies, we see all these nice, fancy, extremely fantastic fishing lines and everything. I'm not familiar with fishing, so excuse me if I'm using the wrong terminology, but why fishing? Why fishing in Barbados?
Well, truthfully, I haven't caught the monsters yet. Still fighting the good fight, but catching anything on my line, chilling with my guys on the jetty, that's where it is for me. Not necessarily catching the Jonas.
Hmm. And movies, you said you're an avid movie watcher. What's the latest movie that you watched and why? Was it good?
Mm. I was watching Predator Badlands. That was pretty good. That was good.
It was good. I've never heard of that. What exactly is that? Is that like a horror? A thriller? What's that?
Um, Alien versus Predator. I know everybody here know.
Oh, excuse me. I didn't recognize it had another name. Very well, very well.
Yeah.
So I thank you so much. Did you have anything else to share as well about yourself? Anything before we move on?
Not really, unless anyone has questions for me.
Right now, the questions, I'm sure they're gonna start rolling in, especially when we start to get into our deep questions. So I really appreciate your introduction. It's great to know that fishing is it's popular in Barbados. It's not just a movie thing, you know, not just a movie thing. So thank you so much for that. And we're gonna move on now to our next panelists. We're going to invite Kenton Gamble. Now, Kenton Gamble is usually the man behind the computer. He's very, very important part and function of the, if I'm being honest. And he's this honorary secretary. So I'm so glad he was able to join us tonight on the other side. And I'm encouraging him now to give us an introduction into civil engineering.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Kenton, and I'm a civil engineer. I work at Adams Consulting International, and I would have graduated from the university in UWE St. Augustine back in 2013. And yeah, I work on structures and I guess as well, civil works as well. So that includes warehouses. At the moment, we would have done some hotels as well, in addition to some work with the water authority in terms of their laying out their pipelines and inspection of their pipelines. A fun fact about me, I like to play tennis, lawn tennis. Um, I represented Barbados a long time ago, almost 18 years ago at Junior Davis Cup. And I also enjoy playing road tennis. And then last thing I have here is I actually wanted to become a architect back in the day. If you look at my secondary school yearbook, my desired career was actually architecture, but it didn't turn out that way. And I actually quite like engineering, and we still got to do some work with architects, so there's no love lost.
So definitely, you're still pretty close, I guess, indeed, to architectural. No, civil is pretty close to that. I don't know the nitty-gritties of the differences that we're gonna go in tonight, but I actually definitely want to look at you tennis. What would have actually made you interested in tennis at a young age?
So my mother used to play lawn tennis with some of her work colleagues. So I used to join her when I was a teeny little thing. So I started probably way back in primary school, and yeah, it's been a long time on the court. It's quite an expensive sport, and but it's fun nonetheless. And I found a way to keep playing despite the expenses involved.
And I don't know if this will be a controversial question, but which one is better, lawn tennis or road tennis?
Well, it depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking at your pocket, probably road tennis. Lawn tennis can get pretty costly if you get to a certain level. You need obviously to maintain the equipment. So every time a racket breaks or the strings break, um, you have to repair the strings. And shoes could be expensive, usually $300. If you're playing consistently, that's probably like a every 6 months. And yeah, so depends on what you're looking at. But I quite like tennis because that's where I started. I play road tennis just for the sweat and the fun of it. Yeah.
That's good to know. And it's also great to see that we have so many various, just interesting facts from everyone tonight. Is definitely so interesting. So I thank you so much for that, Kenton. And we have our final panelist that we definitely want to introduce. We have Jonathan Brathwaite. So Jonathan, whenever you're ready.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As you know, I am Jonathan Braffett. Well, you know what the name look like. My current role, I'm a systems engineer at the Barbados Light and Power Company Limited. My degree is in computer and electrical and computer engineering. This is from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. Um, I would have completed there in 2008, I think it was, long time ago. Um, After that, I went Polytechnic. I did electrical installation diploma there. And I also went looking for work. It was difficult at first, but eventually a friend knew somebody and I ended up working in what Shannon was describing as the MEP industry. They do we call it the building services, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and my responsibility there was around the electrical aspect, which encompassed a lot of different services, especially the extra low voltage services. Um, I worked there for a while, and then they moved on to many different places up to no 2006. What do I do in my spare time? I'm an electrician, so I do electrical work at night. Um, and I play a lot of cricket on evenings. Actually, was at cricket before I came to this. Um, a lot of people, depending on where you ask, some persons don't know that I have an engineering degree because I spend a lot of time sometimes maybe on, as a maintenance person or on a construction site doing work. And then the persons who know I have a degree don't know that I do electrical work. That is me in a nutshell. I just work a lot, so I don't got time to do that much. Besides, probably watch TV and play cricket, and sometimes I sleep.
Sometimes, are you sure that you're still functioning? Because sometimes the sleep sounds a little bit rough. So then I want to actually expand this a little bit on this electrician point of view. I don't think that is quite common for most persons after they get a degree, especially in electrical engineering, to come back and then go and study electrical installation. Have you found that working as an electrician is truly benefited your career in electrical engineering?
Yes, especially because of the designing part in the MEP services for an electrical world. I would have learned a lot on site from the artisans on site, the electricians, etc., which actually kind of change sometimes how you go about doing certain designs. I would have been trained by or I work along other engineers when it came out of school. But there are some places that you work or some industries where they kind of have like status quo or they layer things. So they're the engineers at the top, and then you got the people that do the installation work. The people that installation work are not supposed to know more than the person at the top. But the person at the bottom with that kind of rhetoric coming from the top, they don't send back up problems. And you never know when you're doing a design that what you're currently doing is a problem on site and they will just fix it and you don't know. So I find that getting hands-on experience in the field has shaped how I do the designs, also how I presented designs on drawings for persons to install. Try to make it clearer, and it reduced. Well, for me, it reduced what I call foolish errors that would happen for simple things because of lack of clarity. Um, but I like hands-on work. I just learn something new all the time in the field. Trust me.
So does that mean that you're still learning to this day, you
That is
think?
correct. That is correct. There,
Oh, wow.
there are techniques to do things that you can't learn at school or anything like that. So on different sites, you meet different people using different techniques to get the same task done. Some of them are interesting because it might be a shorter path to get it done. Some of them take longer, but the quality of the work that you get is good. So you gotta kind of I just take from that what I can, mix the two to give a product. Let me put it that way. But
Very
that's
interesting.
side stuff in the boring times.
Well,
When
that
it
I mean,
comes,
but I think that's so important because again, it links back to the very first webinar that we had in this series where working with site teams, I mean, they have to really have we have to humble ourselves as engineers because when we enter and we think that we know everything, we can't possibly leave university and know everything. As Shannon said, we learn everything when you actually start the job. So we're learning so much information every day. Jonathan has been in the field for a long time. Play some cricket. I'm not sure. Are you a fan of the Barbados West Indies? West Indies, Are you a fan of our West
I am
Indies
a
team?
fan
Or?
of good cricketers, good cricket all the day.
Oh, I don't. Is that one of those political answers that, you try to avoid? But it's good to know though. It's good to know. So thank you so much for that, Jonathan. So just again, for those persons who just came in, we've just had all of our introductions for all of our panelists. We have a wide variety of disciplines on the call tonight, and I'm truly thankful that they're able to share their personal experience with us. Everyone here brings their own personal experience in the field. And something that I want to start off this very first line of questioning with is what actually made you all interested in your particular field of engineering? So I'll just let that sink in for a moment. Like, why did I ultimately choose mechanical, or why did I ultimately choose civil, or anything along those lines? So, Jonathan, as you were last, you can might as well start us off with this thoughts.
Yes, why did I choose electrical and computer engineering? To be honest, I was at BCC in the final year, and the other students were applying for university, and they had no intention of applying to any university. I was planning to go and work. So I felt this was not the final year, sorry, this was the first semester in the last year, yeah. I followed probably a friend or whoever, and they filled out a form for UE. And at the end of that semester, I was accepted at St. Augustine to do electrical and computer engineering. That is when I went to really look up to see what it was. And that is how I got into it. I actually liked the computer side of it more. Well, back then, the computer and the communications side and software part of it. But I couldn't find a job when I finished UE in any of those things. And that is how I end up in MEP world, where the majority of that is kind of power lighting and electrical distribution. That was not the subject area that I would gravitate to at school at UE, but it was work. I learned it, and here I am today. I would have built experience over the time in working. The place I worked at, um, they had a lot of work, so I gained a lot of experience and made a lot of connections, etc. And all that is history now.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Quite the gamble you took there. Quite the gamble. Kenton, whenever you're ready, why? Why? I mean, we remember that you said architect, but now we're in civil. Why civil?
I mean, like Jonathan, I guess I was kind of swayed with some other classmates that were doing similar things. So I would have done sixth form, and at sixth form, I did the sciences and math, so physics, chemistry, math. I did technical drawing in I guess for CXE. So I had a love for technical drawing, but it didn't really make sense to do it in sixth form because it wasn't um I would say it wasn't one of the core subjects that persons were selecting at the time and that I wanted to select. And so my journey to civil, like I said, I wanted to do architecture, and the architecture to study architecture would have been a lot more challenging in terms of having to fund my education either in Jamaica or further afield. The university at the West Indies doesn't exactly offer architecture at the moment, or that I'm aware of. And civil was, I guess, the closest thing to that.
Thank you so much for that, Kenton. And it also gives us an idea of the reality that we have to face. Sometimes we do have interests, but that doesn't mean that everything is always going to align exactly as we might want it to, because life is not perfect. And I do think that, and you could, of course, let me know. You enjoy it now, right? It's not like it was a mistake, right?
Yeah, I think it worked out well for me. Like I said, I had the background of doing the sciences, so I think um having that background actually worked well with engineering. Um, I think to do architecture, you probably need to be a little bit more artsy and a little bit more. I think I get to play around with graphics, yes, but I think in terms of color schemes and all of that jazz, I would leave that for the architect and enjoy my the other side of the industry.
Completely understanding. You do a great job, just so you know, in the graphics. We have a comment here. I find it interesting that a few of the panelists attended St. Augustine rather than K-Phil. So just actually to bring some highlight, to my knowledge, and of course anybody can always let me know if another new program has been introduced. For the most part in the Caribbean, a lot of the engineering studies are either going to take place in Trinidad at St. Augustine, and a few, at least in comparison to St. Augustine, are going to also happen at Mona. So, for example, with Tajiri, he would have had a relatively new program for electrical and power engineering. But the only engineering degree I am aware of at KFO right now is software. And I think that's either a 3 or 4 year degree where most participants start 3 years here. Is it a 3 or 2 years here in Barbados? And I think 1 year is spent in China. So I think that's probably why you're gonna find most panelists are gonna be anything but KPhil, essentially. We do also have a panelist who would have went to Canada. So that's definitely something to consider. 4 years total, two in Barbados and two in China. Thank you so much for that correction, Antonio. I really appreciate it. So that's definitely what we're working on. And I really, it would be nice at some point to speak to someone who's actually done that program. Hopefully that's something for the future. So now we're gonna move on to Rashid, and he's gonna let us know why mechanical engineering.
Very good, everybody. Why mechanical engineering? Interesting story. But not really. As I mentioned earlier, I enjoy movies. So what started me in all this, or at least the concept, was Transporter with Frank, Jason Statham. When I was younger, watching him, his big house and movies and whatnot, I mean, and cars and whatnot. I was like, I need some of that life for myself. So I know I wanted to make some money. Then later on, what was it? The Iron Man boy, Robert Downey Jr. That guy was doing some freaky stuff in his basement. But then eventually I grew up, understood what was reality from fiction. And my interest led me to Polytechnic, where I did mechanical engineering. What I enjoyed there mostly was the machining aspect of it. And we did a bit of automotive engineering, where we did some engine overhauls. That was literally heaven for me. And then I went to UE, actually thinking it was a continuation to what I did at Polytechnic. But obviously, I had a rude awakening and I went to UE, St. Augustine, and it's pretty much what the person you see here today.
Do you find that, because I know you just said it was a big shock, I think, going from Polytechnic to university. Do you think anything at all perhaps has helped you in your engineering career from going to Poly?
Not really.
Not really.
This is two,
Nah.
it's two different fields altogether. Polytechnic was
Mm-hmm.
more hands-on, dirty work.
Mm-hmm.
UE is primarily theoretical. Yeah.
And I guess being in the MEP world, you don't really have much of a chance to do any dirty work either.
I service and do repairs to my vehicle
Okay.
and
At
my
least,
friend.
at least that, at least there's still some knowledge that's valuable, even if it's personal.
It's
It's
something
still some
different.
knowledge. But again, it lets you know that sometimes when we leave from one place, so many times we can end up getting a rude awakening. And that's why we're even having this panel discussion here tonight, because we don't recognize when we leave Poly or we leave BCC or we leave UE, and then we actually go into the world of work, how drastically different things can be, especially when UE might have a certain program or Canada might have a certain program that does not cater to the market of Barbados. And then we have a desire to do something in particular, but now we kind of have to shift our focus because bills have to be paid.
True.
Bills have to be paid. So thank you so much for that, Rashid. We're gonna go on back on to Shannon whenever you're ready.
Yep.
So the question that we have for you is, why did you choose software engineering? Why did you choose software engineering?
To be honest, I wouldn't say I chose software engineering. I would say um, it kind of came to me as a next big challenge. Uh, like I said, I was working at Light and Power and I basically felt restless. I wouldn't say it was boring at all. I would say I was getting bored. I was seeking a new challenge. I saw certain signs that were pretty much inviting me into the role. I must admit, I did have the opportunity to attend a few international conferences and I met some graduates from UE, St. Augustine campus as well, that have built their own tech startups and seen some of the things that they were doing working in some of the big tech companies. This was 2014. At the point in time, it felt to me like the obvious choice to make. One thing that I always believed when I chose electrical engineering, let's say that's what I chose, is that electrical engineer can do anything. I will say an engineer can do anything. And if you ask what took me to engineering, it'll be Legos. You know, Rashid, you mentioned Transporter, you mentioned Iron Man. Legos, that endless freedom to create whatever you can envision if you can build it. Definitely, that's what took me towards it.
I'm definitely seeing a lot of that creativity come out in a lot of your speech. So it's definitely very interesting. So thank you so much for that, Shannon. Really appreciate it. So now we're gonna take a look back at Tajiri. Why did you decide to be a little bit different? Why not do the typical electrical and computer engineering at St. Augustine? You did a new program, you made your way over to Mona.
Different,
Basically you were a
different.
guinea pig.
Yeah, I was tested, boy, tested. Most others too. I was the only Barbadian inside that electrical power class. So it was it was new. Um, why you choose engineering? I'm gonna start from when I was like, yeah, hi. I always like to see how little appliances work. Like I would just dismantle something and put it back together. Yes, I may not be 100% successful when they put it back, but I always had the, let's see how to put it. I always had to see the idea of how something operate and what I could do to make changes to it to make it operate better. I always had that will when I was younger. Fast forward now to secondary school, I had to do a lot of process of elimination because, as I mentioned earlier, I was a very active child. First, I was in a band, used to play two instruments, a little toy soldier walking through Bridgestone, playing the clarinet. And I find I want to pursue a career in music. And I find out that in order to get that successful, you had to go BCC, do music, and get this diploma and so on. So I didn't want to do that, so I proceeded to sixth form. Um, I did cricket and track and field. In both of those sports, I got injured. I had to leave that out the way. So within sixth form now, I studied geography. Don't ask me how that got in there. Geography, physics, pure mathematics. I had a very, very good passion. I had a very good passion for physics and math. So I told myself, well, what else can you do as relates to math and physics? And I chose engineering. At first, I fell in love with civil, but I looked at the market for civil engineering and it was very saturated. And I forgot to mention, my dad is also in a similar career as me. He works at Light and Power. He works with electrical. So I just chose that and that's where I am today.
think that's a fantastic journey. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. So I have a question here from someone. So this specifically would go to we have about three officially. We have about three electrical persons, and essentially none of you would have officially studied here in Barbados. So all of you would count as being overseas. So what I want to ask you from this person here, for students graduating from overseas universities, what challenges should we expect when entering the job market in Barbados? And what's the most effective strategy for finding and securing an engineering role? I'll also extend this to Zaria because I think that Zaria coming from Canada, I think even though she's a chemical engineering discipline, I also think that she definitely has something to offer here coming from overseas, out of the region. So we'll actually start with Zaria on this one. Zaria, the first question I want to ask you is what challenges did you have when you actually was trying to enter the job market in Barbados?
Um, well, some challenges that I had, I just found that I was applying to a lot of places, but I wasn't really getting any results. Um, I don't really think that more so ties into the fact that I studied in Canada. I think it's more just the fact that I studied chemical engineering. So it's a bit more niche and there are not as many job opportunities compared to other engineering disciplines. So I think that was probably my biggest challenge. Just applying to jobs, and I realized that like when I look at the job description, they're all things that I believe that I am capable of doing. But I find that certain or like most companies would more just focus on your degree itself. So even though you might study engineering and you have a broad understanding of various engineering principles, they might focus on more a mechanical engineer, civil engineer. So I think that was a big challenge that I had when I first came back, applying to jobs there. Oh, sorry, applying to jobs here. But also on the flip side, the advantage that I had studying in Canada is that it gave me one full year of engineering experience over there. So between my third year and my fifth, or between my third year and my fourth year at university, I worked at Ontario Power Generation as a performance engineering intern. So that was a full year of work experience that I got that I was able to put on my resume when I was applying to jobs in Barbados. That also helped to prove in the job market that I am capable of doing certain engineering discipline. And it's not only just theoretical from coursework, but it's also practical since I had some real world work experience.
Was it difficult to actually find that job in Ontario?
No, well, for me, no, I got a offer fairly quickly, but to be honest, they do focus a lot on your transcripts and your grades. So I had good grades, so I think that worked in my favor, while there were other students in my course, especially, and there were also Canadians as well. So you would think that they would have an advantage being a citizen, but they also had some challenges getting jobs as well. So your grades for sure definitely play a part in Canada specifically for the job that you get. They always ask for transcripts.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that feedback, Zari. I really appreciate it. And the reason why, of course, I'm making sure I include Zari in this conversation is because it's not just about what field of engineering. It's the simple fact that when you come back to Barbados, we have to recognize that when you have certain kinds of degrees, especially if they're niche, job hunting is difficult in general. So I definitely want to get her feedback. We have a raised hand here, Tony Gibbs. If this is the Tony Gibbs I'm thinking about, I know that he is a wealth of experience. Tony, did you want to ask a question or did you want to answer a question?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for allowing me to participate.
Of course.
I graduated 65 years ago, so I don't think that I fit into this group very comfortably. The UWI degree in engineering is based on the UK programs. The UK academic programs assume that after graduation, that the graduate would go through a structured program of training for between 3 and 4 years before sitting a professional engineering exam. In my particular case, it took me 10 years from entering university to becoming a professionally qualified engineer. Those 10 years were 4 years for my first degree. My first degree was a 4-year degree, 1 year postgraduate studies, and 5 years working. And most of those 5 years, I was working under guidance in a fairly structured way. What I'm wondering is there's a huge difference between what I'm hearing from the engineers in this webinar about how they transition from university to the workplace and beyond. So I'm wondering whether the university itself gives any guidance to graduates as to how they should pursue their careers in order to become a professionally qualified engineer. There are no professional qualification tests in Barbados. The Engineers Registration Board does not examine candidates for registration in any formal or robust or rigorous way. And a registered engineer in Barbados is not a professional qualification anywhere outside of Barbados. The reality is that engineering in the Caribbean is more demanding for the average engineer than engineering in the UK or Canada or the USA. So we should have a more rigorous program of academic studies and a professional training than the average engineer in the UK or Canada or the USA. And what is happening at the moment is that we have a less rigorous program. First of all, the University of the West Indies at Mona and at St. Augustine no longer offer a first degree at professional level academic standard. Their first degrees are at sub-professional level, which is not a good idea. And certainly in the field of civil engineering, in the Department of Civil Engineering, at both campuses, their courses are not fit for purpose. That's a horrible thing to say, but I'll give you an easy example. The graduates are expected to work, most of them, in the Caribbean. Most of the Caribbean has to contend with the hazards of hurricane winds and earthquake forces. And the graduates from Mona and St. Augustine in civil engineering know almost nothing about those subjects and almost nothing about dynamic analysis, whereas all of the forces that we have to deal with in the Caribbean are dynamic, be they wind or earthquake or waves. So we have a real problem. And my suspicion is that the governments of Commonwealth Caribbean are not aware of how big the problem is.
Thank you so much for your insight. I just want to make a correction as well in terms of giving you the appropriate title, the Honorable Tony Gibbs. Um, just to make note that he is a fellow of BAPE as well, and to acknowledge your presence here on this call. I thank you so much for giving us your insight and your feedback, especially having been in the field for such a long time. Even though our audience is young, ultimately the purpose of the session is to learn. And I think you've highlighted some very important points that I think everyone on this call can definitely learn and glean from. I can't speak for everyone, but I do believe that when University of the West of St. Augustine, right, specifically, I don't think that they truly prepare their students to enter the world of work as best as they possibly should. And that's why I encourage everyone, make sure you learn from everyone. If you can go to a school that is definitely going to be accredited and is going to give you the information that you need to survive in this world of work, go ahead and do that. And of course, you never have to limit yourself to one place. You never have to limit yourself to one country. You can always be overseas and then you can come back and contribute to Barbados overall and allow us to grow as a society, because what you learn in one area, you can definitely transfer over and apply within Barbados. So I thank you so much for your contribution, the Honorable Tony Gibbs, and I really appreciate you attending this call. Do not feel left out at all. Anything that you have to say, we're definitely thankful for.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. So Zaria, even though we kind of popped in a bit before for that specific question we received from a participant, I just want to allow you at this time to also give us an idea of why did you choose chemical engineering?
Okay, so in sixth form, I would have studied chemistry, physics, and pure math. And I really like chemistry. That was my favorite subject. So at first, I was actually thinking to study a bachelor's in chemistry. But to be honest, my parents were influencing me, telling me that engineering would be better in terms of job security and the job market. So then from listening to them, and I actually do honestly also enjoy physics and math. So I do think chemical engineering would have given me a better blend of all three. And I do believe that is the case as well. In the engineering, chemical engineering, I do learn a bit more math and physics than what I would have gotten if it was just pure chemistry. Also, from my internships before I finished secondary school, I would have been working in labs, like in quality assurance testing and stuff like that. And I realized I didn't really like it. I can't spend my whole day, excuse me, my whole day just in the lab doing tests. And yeah, that wasn't really for me. I like a blend of both, some office work as well as going out in the field. So that is why I chose chemical engineering.
Thank you so much for that, Zaria. So far, we are hearing quite a lot of the persons on the call stating that they really want to get out there and be in the field. And I think that's so important to know that even though engineering does have that theoretical component to it, we need to get outside and we really need to see what is out there in the market. We need to learn as much as we possibly can, not just from the books and just from the screen, but for what is happening in real life. So we're going to switch up things a little bit different now. We're going to be calling on persons randomly. And I want to now reach out to Jonathan. I'm going to reach out to Jonathan. And I want you to kind of give me an idea. You've been in this field for a long time. You've kind of seen where things can go right, where things can go wrong. You've interacted not only from being a person who had to learn, but I'm pretty sure you're at that stage in your career now where interacting with persons now coming in and entering the field. And I want to know what skills, even if it's a top three, what skills do you really think engineers need right now in this job market in Barbados?
What skills? Well, relating to my current role, what I do now, I'm in utility. At least one of the skills I would say you should have is one to ensure that you're open to learn new stuff. The electrical utility space is transitioning extremely rapid from what it used to be for a very long period of time. And to have an open-mindedness to understanding new technologies and to want to learn the new technologies, it has to be that has to be built in. Um, there's some persons who would say, I have been doing this for the last X amount of years. Are you ready in about retooling? But I think that that is one important thing that you have to have a open mind to. The next thing I would skill or the next thing say I would do entering the market, working is, and I think I mentioned this before, the willingness to learn from like the persons that have experience. Well, they may not have degrees or the what we will call the paperwork to back it. That in no way means that they're not experts at what they do. I would have found persons in certain industries. I would have outside. I didn't mention, but I would have worked in like manufacturing. I work in oil and gas. Um, well, and it was used the term the older persons. If you could garnish the information they have, because it is not in the engineering field, that is a technical thing. It is not as if somebody working in an office or whatever the case is where their work is repetitive. Technically in the field, although somebody has been there for, let me say 30 years, they can't be there for 30 years and don't know nothing. So it's to have again an open mindedness to learn from somebody or the persons with the experience where although again I can say it, they don't have the paperwork, their length of time alone gives them the power to they actually have to train you in the work that you're going about doing. I can't think of that as no. But he told those for sure, the 2 pointers. Open-mindedness and learning from the persons with experience or wanting to listen to them. I remember one there was an engineer that I worked with a lot. I don't think he's here. That was Mr. Hutchinson. He wasn't in the electrical, but there we did a lot of work with them. And one thing I remember him saying repeatedly was that the devil is in the detail. So one of the things that I do with my work, and in whichever area, I just look for the devil. So I just always try to find the details and stuff that has helped farm your outcome so you don't have to do repetitive work. So I remember he also used to talk about designing twice and building once, the concept of it. As an engineer, you don't know everything. So it's good that you look back at your designs, double check it, triple check it before you send it to site to be built or implemented. Um, yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for that, Jonathan. So again, we're kind of getting at idea is that we have to learn, learn, learn. Keep that mind open. You can learn something every day, regardless of how long you've been in the field. And do not limit yourself to think that you have to learn from someone directly in your discipline. Engineering is a mindset. And yes, there are certain specific concepts that you're going to be exposed to in your field, but you definitely want to make sure that you are soaking in as much information from everyone that you can. So now, what I want to do, since we've covered some of the skills, I actually would like to move on to speak to Rashid. I know you said you're in the MEP field, and I could imagine that you've had the opportunity to work with some on-site teams more from the designer point of view. I'm curious to know what has that experience been like for you, working with people on site, coming from the design.
I would say this could tie into actually what I believe Shannon was saying, right? I treat everyone with respect. And when you show people respect, sometimes they reciprocate it. And they're at least sometimes even willing to share. And just like Shannon said, there's always an opportunity to learn. Even to this day, I learn something new every day. And the guys on site, they have experience. And I don't take everything I hear, to heart, but it's definitely considered and reviewed, and ties into my day-to-day design, design work, and truthfully, building good relationships with people on site. When things go wrong, they call you, and give you the opportunity to address it before at the end of the project, where it becomes a huge variation, you know. So yeah, building good relationships on the job site, I find has been very helpful in my career.
Thank you so much for that, Rashid. And again, we kind of get an idea that not only are we learning from people, but we're respecting people for what they have to offer and what they present. I can imagine that, especially as a young engineer, especially if you do not know everything, when you go there and you start to speak with people who have been in the field for so long that they're going to spot your mistakes easily. And some of them will probably not want to tell you anything. But when you build that relationship, you definitely have an opportunity now to grow in more ways than one. So I really appreciate that feedback. And I think it's definitely going to be beneficial, not only for anyone who is new, but for anyone who may not have entered that field as yet. Because as we can see, even from the various experiences that we have on the call, you may not always end up in the same field all the time throughout your entire career. It's a possibility that you can start in one field and move to another, move to another. So you always take what information you can and you work with it as best as you can because it can apply in any way. So what I want to do now is that I actually want to go on to Shannon because I can imagine in software engineering, let me know if I'm wrong, but you're expected to work with various people in various disciplines as well. How does that work for you in terms of working with people?
I would say it works out just the same way as any engineer. Um, Certainly, um, soft skills might be considered on the surface, to be more important than actually hands-on. But to be very honest with you, I feel like if there is an equal level of having to understand who you're working with, but not only who you're working with, but also what you're working on. And that ultimately leads to a better solution. I think Mr. Gibbs, I hope I'm getting his name correctly, made a great point when said that, well, when he alluded towards the potential lack of engineering talent or skills or rather expertise within the region, especially us being such a disaster-prone, a hurricane-prone region. There are some things that you only learn by working with other persons, especially persons that come from different backgrounds, persons that come from different cultures. You learn different approaches, and more importantly, you learn how to work with people. Sometimes there's this saying that, as I said before, you only start learning when you're actually on the job. And some people say that in terms of university, that's when you learn how to learn. Well, in my opinion, in terms of engineering, it's just like that. You only really know how to deal with problems, especially new problems, after you face a wide gamut of problems. And you're not going to face that just being here in Barbados or by only focusing on what you yourself have been taught directly. Um, so the only thing that I would really say that really stands out about software engineering, besides other forms of engineering, is that lives may not be at risk if you make a mistake on day one. And that's something to always consider in terms of engineering. And that's why the professional certification is so important. Lives are at risk if you make mistakes.
Definitely understand that. So that's why we can see and we can appreciate that it's so important that we are setting a standard to cut above the rest. Because even though university may, as you said, he may have alluded to, there are certain things that we're probably not being exposed to, but are reality for our environment. When you go ahead and set yourself as a cut above the rest by having a level of standards, by actually trying to operate, knowing that when you make a design, knowing that when you actually go then you implement something, you're either going to be putting people's lives at risk or you're going to be costing people money. So when you keep that in mind, it definitely should help you with the type of choices that you choose to make as you go throughout your career. The next person that we're going to go on to now is Kenton. So Kenton, I'm curious for your field in terms of civil, because I think for the most part, civil is probably one of the more popular types of degrees that Barbadian students tend to study when they go, whether it be Trinidad or anywhere else. But a lot of people tend to study civil engineering. And I'm hoping this isn't too tough of a question, but I want to know what are some of the biggest challenges that you think they're actually more likely to experience leaving university or leaving wherever they are and coming into this field for the first time? What are some of the biggest challenges that they're likely to experience in that field?
It's an interesting question. I guess filling in those gaps of knowledge, as Tony Gibbs would have alluded to. We are we have several hazards that affect us here in the region, and even though during school they are discussed and taught about, I mean, the real world understanding of them and how they apply to your design. A lot of that is learned in the office setting, and being able to apply it to your current context. Obviously, we study in Trinidad, and if we do any design work, typically it would be in each Trinidadian context. When you return, you have different soil profiles, different factors in terms of the seismic coefficients that apply. So there are a number of different things that changes when one gets into the field. And obviously, unlike in engineering school where you have most of the variables um, given to you um, for you to do your calculation, you have to go and do your research and acquire the relevant variables necessary to conduct your calculations. So it's a little different, and having someone that is able to assist you in these early years in terms of learning the processes is quite important.
Understood. Thank you so much for that. So you can see that we're having, even in the studying as well, studying in Trinidad, when they do their program, they're going to do their program relevant to their society, relative to things that affect them. But then when you leave wherever you study, you didn't have to come back and apply that to your local context. And it takes time. It takes you having the chance to learn from somebody who's already been on the ground learning for an extended period of time to transfer that knowledge over to you. So that's definitely a big challenge that I think most people probably don't think about. That where you study and what they teach you may not necessarily apply directly or instantaneously for when you come back home. So that's very important. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So, Tajiri, I know that you're extremely young, and I'm curious to know for your circumstance as well, having gone through your program, having seen what your program was like, I know you're working in the service engineering field, right? What lessons have you been learning thus far after leaving school? What lessons are you learning currently?
So, as mentioned, yes, I'm relatively new in the work world. I've only worked for TMR about 2 years now. I kind of have a bit of both worlds, being the technician and engineer world, because I did like about 6 months after I graduated, because if I really wanted some money, so I installed his solar panels. And having to work in that world, I it it basically, how to put it, helped me understand as to how technicians operate, how they go about doing things, and so on. And observing how they communicate between their supervisor slash manager and them, it was kind of a lot of tension. And from that experience, I took it upon myself to see the issue in a lot of workforces, because that's not only in that company. I find a lot of workforces experience that. And I find the huge problem is communication. Um, Simple things like if you want to get a task done to a certain way, or if you done something or done a change to something and you haven't communicated with someone, it can cause a huge, huge problem. And I know I'm saying communication, I don't only mean about talking or speaking to someone, but also learning from the person, um, being able to experience what they're experiencing. Like in my field of work, I kind of work kind of hand in hand with technicians. Sometimes they will have to report to me. And I forgot to mention, I was recently offered a role of operations manager. So most definitely, I would have to be in communication with the technicians and learning that communication skill. I'm gonna just repeat Jonathan's point. It helps you to understand what they do, and sometimes I would tend to go in because we have a workshop for the motors. I tend to go in there the workshop. I know ask them, well, how you go about doing this or how you go about doing that. And the fact that you're interested in what they're doing, it is you and it is them to build that bond. And also from what you learn in your degree, you're learning as to why this thing works. And the fact that they just do things because they do it based off their experience, like 20 years of experience. And then when you combine them together, as you know why it works this way and the outcome, you feel like you're winning $1 million. So yeah, communication comes a long, long way as you get into your workforce. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Tajiri. It really highlights something that I think if not for the most part, we encounter every day. Some of the parts of the day we definitely encounter that, and that is communication in all forms. That's communicating to get your point across, communicating to listen to someone else's point, and communicating to learn. So communication is so important, and we definitely have to remember that that's something that we need to be working on, not only in school, but when we come out into the field of working. So Zaria, I want to come over to you now because I want you to kind of give us an idea of what kind of challenges and what kind of lessons are you learning in chemical? Because I think chemical is probably one of the very, very niche markets in Barbados where most people probably don't even have a full basic idea of what chemical engineers do. So take me into the field of chemical engineering and tell me what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? What lessons have you learned since graduating from school?
Um, some of the lessons that I've learned specifically in chemical is that although you might not be in a role that is specifically chemical engineering, I think you could still learn a lot from it. So, for example, my first job after graduating university was actually on a construction site, which is very vastly different from chemical engineering. However, the things that I learned on that site in terms of reading MEP drawings, understanding the utility, installation, project scheduling, managing resources, managing time, managing materials, stuff like that. All of that are things that I use in my job currently, which is more along the lines of chemical engineering. So just a bit of advice for like the young engineers are starting their career. Just taking anything that you can at any job from any engineer, non-engineer. Yeah, just whatever you can learn, just take it in, internalize it, and I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to use some of those same skills in your engineering job. Um, you said to speak on the field of engineering,
Challenges. So the
challenges.
challenges. So what challenges do you experience in chemical? Is it when it's extremely dangerous in any way? So what challenges are you experiencing in the chemical engineering field now, especially at your current role, perhaps?
Well, some of the challenges that I am facing is that we have a fairly aged infrastructure. So I work in natural gas. The infrastructure is fairly aged. So now it's kind of my responsibility to kind of remedy these issues that we might be having. For example, corroded pipelines or leaking pipelines. Um, right. So I am actually currently working on drafting an RFP to get some welders and non-destructive testing contractors to come in and do that. So that is a bit of a challenge because you're inheriting a condition that you are new to. So I wasn't here years previously when the pipe was installed, but yeah, I'm the one that has to now remedy the challenges that the company is facing in terms of this aging infrastructure. But at the same time, it's not too bad. Like it's a good challenge. Um, it's good I get this responsibility as well, because from my other job roles, I always kind of felt like I wasn't really fully reaching my full potential. But now that I'm in this role, with more responsibility, I do feel like I'm growing a lot more as an engineer and also as a person.
Thank you so much for that, Zaria. And you've definitely highlighted something that I think perhaps it plagues the Barbadian society overall, which is we do have a lot of aging infrastructure and things that we've probably never seen, never heard about, never
Mm.
even gotten a chance to see when we were in university. And as we understood based on what is mentioned in the call, everything is changing so rapidly that you don't sometimes even have a chance to catch up. So you have to play catch up with how fast everything is changing, but then you also have to kind of fix some of the things of old. And do you think that there's a significant increase in the quality now that perhaps the piping and the pumps are and anything else that you need in your field versus what is currently there? Do you think that there's been a significant increase in that?
Just to be clear, so you're asking if there has been an increase,
Sorry,
like
like
in
improvement,
use?
sorry. So like have things now, like if you go and you put down and you change what's there, do you think it's gonna last for another 100 years? Or do you think it's gonna be for a short time frame? How is
I
the
think it
quality of
def
the products increase?
I think it definitely would last a lot longer, especially when it's done properly and holistically. So if, for example, I could use the same example for what I'm working on right now in one of the regulator stations. If a valve is leaking, rather than just changing that specific valve, you could change the whole spool so that even so 10 years, 20 years from now, you know that that entire piece of equipment is good rather than just changing the valve. And then 10 years down the line, the pipe corrodes because you left it there. So I do think that the materials and also the equipment that we have now available would be more durable, and also because now we use a lot more imports. Well, I'm sure back in the day, you might use you wouldn't have as vast of options from global shipping and what's not. So I do think now we have more resilience in terms of those kind of things.
That's great. So it's true. We're having a greater opportunity now for better options, better things available. But I guess now the biggest challenge is the choice. Too many
Mhm.
choices, right?
Yeah.
The biggest challenge is the choice. So what we're gonna do now is that we're gonna be finalizing our closing comments from our panelists. And the biggest question that I want everyone to just finish off with, even if it's just something brief, is you know where you are right now, but if you could go back to when you first started, when you were first entering, what advice would you give to yourself? And we're gonna start with Zaria because we just ended the Zaria.
What advice would I give to myself when I first started working or first started studying?
Working.
Working. Um, I would say like just be confident and believe in yourself, because like the work, you graduated, you got your degree, it shows that you are competent in that specific area. And I think just some advice to just be confident. Don't let anybody get in your head too much. Because being a young engineer, especially a young female engineer, people always have something to say, especially being in a male dominated industry. But if you just keep your head on your shoulders, like keep your mind focused on what you have to do the work. I think that is a good piece of advice for young engineers, especially females. Like, just don't let anybody pull you down.
Thank you for that, Zaria. Tajiri, what advice would you have given yourself basically last year?
Year before,
Now that
not
you
too
are where you
bad.
are. All right, year before.
Yeah, year before. Um, Advice. Honestly, things have run quite smoothly for me. Um, so I can't really say much about advice starting to work because I'm still in the process of understanding my role and so on. And now that I'm transitioning into another role, uh, it's still quite difficult to answer that question. I could say though, for students, before you go into work, ensure you have a wide clientele, as in you network. Um, Not only network at the customer base level, but also network as in your peers and mentors. Um, Fortunate slash unfortunate for me, my dad was in a similar career as me, so I was able to introduce myself to um, fellow members of him or persons who've worked with him before, and it has definitely benefited me throughout my career. I've gained a lot of knowledge from mentors and peers, and also from him. So the advice for you is to network a lot, come out the shell. I know a lot of engineers, people tend to say a lot of engineers are nerds and so on. Come out that shell, make sure you just introduce yourself, get to know someone, because from the moment you come out yourself, you show that confidence and so on, people look up to you and they really respect you.
Thank you so much for that, Jiri. Really appreciate it. Networking is so important. And you're right, people do have that perception of engineers, but based on how well everyone has been speaking on this call tonight, you're definitely dispelling that, I think. So we're working towards that for sure. Shannon, if you had to go back to your first year, whether it be your first year in electrical or your first year moving over to software, what advice would you give yourself then?
Hmm. But I would just I was I would say I'll remind everyone here, and I'll also remind myself that engineer is not just a job. It's your career, it's your lifestyle. And if you approach everything from that angle, then I would tell everyone to, even though you're young engineers or you're to be engineers, that doesn't mean that you don't have insights that the more experienced engineers don't want to hear. So be willing to learn, as everyone has said, be willing to be challenged and be willing always to take on new challenge. Just because that's how you grow and that's how you build a career that over time people will will come to you with opportunities because they know that you bring value and you bring that engineering mindset. So engineering is a lifestyle.
Thank you so much for that, Shannon. Rashid, what advice would you give yourself when you go back to that first year starting working in mechanical? What would you say?
Hmm. Advice. I wanted to make some money as a fact. I also enjoyed engineering, but I wanted to make some money. And in my initial stages of working, I'd say manage those expectations, right? In the initial phase of working, your first job is probably going to pay you crumbs, but I would encourage myself to see the bigger picture. I understand that knowledge is power. And I believe in those initial stages, at this point now, looking back, it's about building experience and competency. I'd advise myself to apply to every single job within the field of my degree. Um, I'd advise myself to also lock in every bit of training you could get, and put your absolute best foot forward in every single thing you do. You're gonna learn a lot that way in your downtime, especially when you first start a job. It pretty much useless. It's a training period, losses to the company and all that. Is really a race to get as competent as possible, to fill those shoes. And companies really should give you training, but learn on the side on your own, speed up that process. And truth is, when you learn for yourself, it sticks. When you're hungry for the knowledge, and truth is, once you know it, no one can take it from you, and you can only get better as you progress in your career, and that's growth.
Thank you so much for that, Rashi. And finally, Kenton, Jonathan had to leave, so Kenton, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say I agree with most of what I would have gone before. I think the importance of being able to communicate and being confident in yourself and your ability um, will greatly add to your, I guess, your professionalism in the working environment. I think as well, in terms of advice that I would give to myself, I would say try to keep up to date with the new software and new knowledge out there in the field. Um, for us in engineering, civil engineering, at least there are a number of different software that have come about over the years. In school, we probably would have just done AutoCAD, but coming on stream is a lot more three-dimensional software, Rivet, and other softwares that I would have learned over the years after leaving school. So it's important that you continue to learn, continue to seek knowledge, and continue to improve yourself as an engineer.
Thank you so much for that, Kenton. And finally, I want to thank all of the panelists who would have attended tonight. I want to extend great thanks to Zaria Lane, to Jerry Griffith, Shannon Clark, Rashid Thompson, Kenton Gamble, and Jonathan Brathwaite. Everything that you shared tonight was truly valuable, and we were even able to hear from the Honorable Tony Gibbs. There was so much information here tonight that I am sure I've learned, and anyone who has attended this call, whether you've been in the field for a short time or a long time, all information has truly been received well. Right now, I just want to remind you of just a few things as we end off our panel discussion. We have here the Angus Cho Scholarship Fund that has been sent out recently to our membership. It should have been on our social media as well. What is happening is that we are trying to encourage students to actually go there and study engineering. So BATE is the administrator for this scholarship, and we encourage you to secure the items that you see here on the list. Share it with anyone you know that is looking to do an undergraduate degree from this year coming, or who might currently be studying and they might want a top of their funds. So applications opened on April 1st, so you can go ahead and start that process. The next thing I also want to highlight is, again, feedback. The form itself is not very long, it's about 2 minutes. It's anonymous, which means I do not know who submitted what, but I do actually look at that information, and I always use it to make the panel discussions and the webinar series better and better. So that's what we've been doing thus far. I also want to give you a brief highlight that we are going to be having another webinar next month, so you can look out for that on our social media. And this one is going to be dealing with managing stress and imposter syndrome in engineering. At this time, the President Ray Moore would like to say something. So Ray, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Ria. Thanks very much for chairing this panel discussion, and thanks to the panelists and all those who would have participated. I think it's a very important and interesting discussion that was had. Very good insights. And I just wanted to add that, one of the key things in your first 2 or 3 or 4 years that you have to also look into is attempting to connect with an older engineer who could be a mentor. I think that is important. I think that was mentioned before as well in one of the panelists, but somebody who's going to be there for you to answer your questions, whether on the technical side of things or rather on the soft skill side of things. I think that's an important thing. The BAP recognizes this and is looking to roll out a mentorship plan later this year. So those persons who are on the call, or if you know other persons not on the call that want to be a part of this mentorship program, those who want to be mentees, feel free to contact the secretariat, contact Ria if you have her contact information. And those, of course, on the call who are older and want to be mentors, feel free to also contact the secretariat or Ria as well. So I wanted to just encourage you and thank everybody again. Thanks so much.
So thank you so much again to everyone who was in attendance. Just remember, the links are in the chat that you can easily click on, both the scholarship link and the feedback link. Thank you so much again to everyone in attendance. And I just want to bid everyone a fantastic night and a great and restful and enjoyable Easter weekend. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good
you, everybody.
night.
Good night.
For those that have to travel, travel safely. Thank you.